Hi, it's Dr. Steve from Misericordia University. In today's online class, let's start considering managing problem behaviors. This video represents partial instruction for TD 377, 378, classroom management in secondary and middle level education. In this video, as we're seeking to explore types of motivation and behavior management problems in secondary and middle level students, let's consider the levels of problem behavior. Let's start looking at some interventions, and then let's consider the possibility of creating a behavioral contract with certain students. Throughout this course, we have sought to explore the many different approaches to classroom management. The behaviorists have proposed theories, the constructivists, and also many individual theorists. Like teaching, classroom management is both an art and a science. You can glean different ideas and draw specific practices from various theorists. Considering the various approaches to classroom management, let's now seek to organize or summarize classroom management issues into a more easily understandable structure. Here you see a pyramid. Notice that the bulk of the pyramid is down on the bottom where we say these are not serious classroom management issues. Now, as you move up the pyramid to the more serious, you notice that there are fewer of these more serious instances. So don't fear. For the most part, teachers are dealing with these not serious issues on the bottom. So let's classify problem behaviors into several classifications, several different levels. You're in the classroom and you're seeking to understand certain behaviors that you're seeing and trying to determine how to deal with them. You could classify these behaviors into these levels. The most basic level is a non-problem, and then it can move up a step to become a minor problem. And the way the teacher would deal with these will be different. If you don't catch it and deal with it as a minor problem, it may turn into a major problem, but it's contained. It's only within one or two students at that time. If a teacher does not properly deal with that major problem that's contained, then it becomes a major problem that starts spreading. Let's take a better look at this way of viewing behavior problems in the classroom. When we consider a non-problem, these are the common behavioral issues that you see in the classroom. These are brief activities. They don't really interfere with instruction at all. It's just people being people. So, for example, maybe brief minor talking, maybe brief off-task activities. In general, a teacher can decide to ignore these if they're not an issue, but you continue to monitor and make sure that it's not going to step up a level. If you were to deal with every instance of every non-problem, this really would become an interruption, and it would become a drain both on you as a teacher as well as uh, put a lot of burden on the class as well. If you step up one level, we would classify that as a minor problem. So this means that students are either going against your classroom rules or procedures that you've established and taught, but they're not really seriously interfering with learning. So examples of that would be students calling out or leaving their seats or passing notes. Maybe now the talking is extended and it's a little more involved. The students are eating or they're engaging in some types of off-task activities. Okay, now these minor problems, you have to address these. Do not let this behavior slip by. If you're not careful, these behaviors can spread. They can kind of step up another level and become a more major problem. They can affect learning, and they can undermine your classroom management efforts. So these definitely you have to deal with them right then and there. Minor problems, if left unchecked, can become major problems. But at first, they'll be contained. They'll be limited to just one or a few students. But these major problems, these are things that do disrupt activities. They do interfere with learning. They will undermine your classroom management system. Examples of these: students who outrightly refuse to do certain work or to comply with what you ask, students who are definitely breaking classroom rules, maybe they're chronically off task. If you do not deal effectively with a major problem that is, at least for now, contained, it will move up a level to a major problem that is spreading. So this type of problem is any kind of behavior that becomes commonplace, and it's a threat to order in the classroom. So examples of these kinds of problems are students roaming around the room, students talking back, students refusing to comply with the teacher's requests. Okay, this can be very serious. So if you view classroom management issues according to this simple four-level classification system, it can help you as you consider how to effectively address these behaviors in the classroom. Having looked at how to classify behavioral issues, let's now turn our focus to interventions. Let's look at interventions for the minor issues, for moderate, and for more extensive issues as well. When dealing with minor issues, remember to try to keep the teaching learning flow moving. Try not to interrupt instruction. Start with some nonverbal cues and monitor to see if the student or students comply with what you're asking them. Use your teacher presence. Remember, when you're standing and everyone else is seated, you're the tallest person in the room and you can walk around to make a difference. Maybe that will be enough. Think about increasing the pace of the activity. Maybe the pace is moving a little too slowly, and because of that, the students are tempted to go off task. Redirect the behavior and say, here's what we should be doing, and lead people back on task. Maybe you have to tell a student to stop the behavior. Remember to be polite about it when you do so. Maybe you can frame a choice. So you can say, like, you may choose X, but if you continue, you're really going to be choosing this other thing, which is a consequence. In other words, the power is in your hands to decide what you're going to do. You can use an I message. Remember, in class, we said that no student can argue if you say, this makes me feel, I feel this. I would like you to do this, as opposed to saying, you must do this. So if you wanted to use this I message, you could say, when you do engage in this behavior, it causes these things to happen, and I feel this about this, or other students are disrupted and they feel this. So if you say an I message, you're talking about what you feel primarily, and again, no one can argue with what you feel. Maybe you can withhold a privilege or some desired activity, but allow the ability for the student to earn it back. So start slowly and then ramp it up a little more if you need to. Maybe you need to isolate certain students, or maybe you have to remove them from the situation. Maybe you could impose a penalty or a fine. Now, realize that some teachers will make this penalty or this fine an extra assignment. So if I'm teaching math, I could say, well, I will basically punish you by giving you more math work to do. Is that the message you want to send? I'll torture you with I'll penalize you with my content area. So think about that one before you would use it. But if you're going to impose some type of penalty, maybe choose something more appropriate. Again, if you have to amp it up a little bit more, you could give the student, recommend them for detention. Okay, if you do this, first of all, most students would want to avoid this. Well, it does limit the extra attention on the situation. If you do this, just realize that sometimes you're going to be taking a student out of class who probably really needs to be in class more than some of the other students. If you remove a student from the situation, again, isolate them, maybe you can conference with them. You're taking it up a step, you're taking it up a notch. Now you can conference, you can talk to them. And again, when you do that, you're going to exercise the power of your relationship with that student. If you have to, you could refer the student to the office. But again, if you can handle it locally first, you would certainly want to exhaust all those options before looking at detention or referring a student to the office. If a situation with a student requires more extensive intervention, think about employing some of the steps of the reality therapy model proposed by William Glasser. Glasser says, first of all, you want to demonstrate caring and interest in the student. We're not trying to punish them. We're not trying to penalize them in some way or hurt them. We're caring about them. We just want the best for them. He says, definitely conference with that student. Talk to that student privately and be very frank. What's happening? What's going on here? Help me to understand. And I found that students, when you approach them through that power of your relationship with them, that they tend to be very honest if you ask them something. Help a student accept the responsibility for what they're doing. Now, chances are they are trying to act out something. And remember, we said there were 4 different underlying motivations pointed out by several researchers that a student might be doing. There might be something underlying this. So help the student evaluate their behavior. Uh, how did this behavior hurt you? Or how did it hurt others? After you start to understand and you're both talking more candidly, then maybe you'll need to take it up a notch and say, let's develop a plan or a contract. So let's do a behavioral contract. Let's have the student commit to agreeing to that plan or contract, and they'll be involved in helping set the terms of that. And then you can monitor and follow through. Let's take a better look at behavioral contracts. To clarify, consider putting a student on a behavioral contract when classroom consequences are repeatedly not working. And further, the behavior of that student is holding back learning not only of that student, but it's disrupting teaching and learning for the entire class. Those are 2 telltale signs that a behavioral contract might be an appropriate intervention. When you're going to use a behavioral contract with a student, again, begin by discussing the problem. Try to get to the why. Why is this happening? Why is your behavior as such? And then with the student, try to identify some possible solutions. Like, what can we do in the classroom? And what can you do as a student to seek out a possible solution? How can we help you change this behavior to something more positive? and then with the student agree on a course of action. In that process, specify here is specifically the expected change in behavior. Point out some consequences if they do not comply with this. And also maybe include some type of an incentive, some type of positive reinforcement, something that they can look forward to get rewards along the way if they are following the terms of that behavioral contract. As part of this behavioral contract, it's important to get buy-in from the student. They have to realize that you're not trying to hurt them, but you want them to succeed. And that's essential for the behavioral contract to succeed. They've got to buy in. In the process, think about designing a behavior rating with the student. Like, what will the positive behavior look like? And let's create a rating system. And then allow the student to encourage the student to take responsibility for self-assessing. Because remember, one of the three goals of classroom management is to help a student learn how to ultimately manage themselves and their own behavior. That's very significant for being a good citizen in the world. Realize that this behavioral contract it'll be private. Other students will not be aware of it. So these private contracts can be issued to individual students who are in need of this type of help. And sometimes it's just a motivation issue because we want them to follow the class expectations and behavioral norms. One researcher, Pariser, suggests to think about contracts as behavioral training wheels. Remember when at one point in your younger life you learned to ride a bike and your family probably put on these training wheels? Well, at first you need that just to kind of to stay upright so you don't fall. In time, your parents would probably raise those training wheels a little bit higher, so it's like a fallback in case you run into trouble, but you're mainly standing on your own. And finally, one day, your folks would remove the training wheels because you no longer need them. That's the goal of a behavioral contract. In the process of attempting to determine a more extensive intervention, sometimes you want to get parents or guardians involved. For example, with a behavioral contract, you may want the parent to be aware of it and to function as a partner in this process. Um, Sometimes you don't. If you're going to, tell the parent you would appreciate their support because you want to understand what the issue is. You want to help resolve the issue. Maybe they're experiencing that at home or something similar, just as you're experiencing in the classroom. In this process, be careful so you don't make the parent feel defensive or make it seem like you're holding them responsible for what their child is doing. In this process, determine if phone or in-person meeting is warranted. So base your decision on what you know about the student and hopefully at that point what you know about their parents. But keep in mind, some parents are going to overreact, some are going to be defensive, some are not going to be supportive of some of your actions. So think about that in terms of where the parent should be involved here, or maybe you can start it again locally before you need to go to that level. So do you have any experience with behavioral contracts? Chances are you don't. If it did not apply to you, this might have been happening behind the scenes in your school and you never noticed it. So let's take a look. Let's go online and get some help. So I'm going to a search engine and I'm going to go to an image search and I'm going to search for behavioral contract and I'm going to type high school or I could type middle school. So as I look around, there are many examples, including some examples where you can purchase various contracts. They're already pre-made and you can find them at sites like Teachers Pay Teachers and Etsy and other similar sites. So I'm going to click on one. I'll go into the site and let's take a better look at what they offer and what we can learn from them. On some sites, you'll notice there are self-assessments like here that we could use with students. Now this one looks more like an early childhood or elementary example. Notice in many of the contracts, they're saying what is a behavioral contract and what does it mean? How does it work? What's going to happen? And then there are areas for the teacher, the student, and maybe even a parent to sign as well to show that they're aware of things. Here's an example where you can see a similar situation, but specifying now the teacher's job, the student's expectations, and what we expect of the student, I should say, and the consequences. But remember, you can also include in some positives, some rewards if the student is making positive progress. Keep in mind that when you perform a behavioral contract or engage in one with a student, that you're going to negotiate with them. You're going to talk it out. You're going to work out what is the student's job? What are they going to do? Sorry for the ads popping up. So this is an idea of what you can find online. You can get a lot of help and kind of figure out what's going on just by looking at different examples. So when we talk about student self-assessment, here's an example, again, another template that I downloaded for free online. So here we have a scoring system, so a rating system of 1 through 4. So basically like a rubric. And here we have the behavioral goals will be inserted here that the student and teacher agree upon. The student will self-assess according to that scoring system. The teacher will assess as well according to that system. And then they're allowing room that after a period of time, maybe this is after 1 week, based on those performance levels for that reporting period, the goals need to be adjusted or maybe they don't. So the realization that this contract could even be flexible as needed to assist the student in improving their behavior. A second approach I could take is to enter an AI tool and seek some help from that tool as an assistant. So here I'm in Google and I'm going to click into AI mode to access Gemini. And I've written a prompt that's going to give some specifics. So I'm asking to please create a behavioral contract that I can use with an 8th grade student. So I'm specifying the level of the student. Now let's describe what the behavior issue or issues are. In this case, the student is disrupting the class by calling out without permission and seeking to gain the attention of the teacher and other students. Now I'm going to specify what I'm looking for. Please create a space where the teacher and student can list behavioral expectations, because I know that's going to be part of it. Include a rating scale where a student can self-rate and the teacher can rate the student's progress. All right, let's send it out and let's see what the tool returns. So here we're finding some things that we already had looked at. The goal, like what's the purpose of the contract. So here's the area we asked for, the expectations. And again, the student will do and the teacher will help and what the teacher will be expected to do. Looking good. Okay, so here's the daily. In this case, they're saying, suggesting daily progress tracking. And again, there's some rating and comments are available here. Okay, looks good. Incentives and consequences. Okay, and signatures. In this case, they're talking about the student and the teacher. Now, I always say when you're working with an AI tool, I always laugh and say, don't be an AI fool. Interact with the tool. In other words, don't just take what they've given you. How would you like to tweak this contract? Did it give you everything that you need? For example, when I look at this, do I want to include a parent or guardian signature? Okay, I can, which says ask anything, I can say, please add this section. When I look at the expectations, do I need more space here? Okay, I can add that in down here. Now they're talking about daily progress monitoring. Is that what I want to do? If not, I can ask for a tweak in that area. I like the idea of incentives and consequences. Very good. Now, maybe we need to change that a little bit. Is there something else that we need? Well, then mark it down and then take a look at how you want this to be output. Is it a Word document? Like what kind of form do you want this in? So interact with the tool and then tweak it to get what you need. Now, if you're very new to behavioral contracts, and again, chances are, if they didn't apply to you, they might have been going on around you, but you didn't know that they were there. Maybe ask the AI tool to fill one in and provide an exemplar. So you have an example of what it could look like. Thanks for watching today's video. To wrap up and to culminate and put into practice what we've looked at, please open up Mod 4D, the folder in Blackboard. In this class activity, start by selecting a type of problem behavior that you might observe from a student in class. Maybe it's something you have in a field experience or somewhere in your high school experience. Maybe things like a student clowning around or cheating or lying or stealing or using profanity or inappropriately using electronic devices or some other behavior. Assume you've tried various interventions and the student just keeps on exhibiting this behavior. And let's develop a behavioral contract to use with this student. You could try locating a contract template in word processing, such as Word or Google Docs. You could search for a template on Google Images or use an AI tool. And then remember, interact with the tool and modify the contract to meet the needs of that particular student. And finally, upload the contract that you create to Blackboard. Thanks again for watching and look forward to seeing you in person class very soon.